on the news. A Catholic devotion recited over and over.
These are rosary beads. You've seen them, maybe you've held them, but do you know how to pray with them? I'm Jessica Easthope with one priest who's on a mission to teach his students the right way.
A touted tent city, but it's pretty empty. What the homeless have to say about New York's outreach to migrants. Then midterm mayhem.
It's not politically motivated at all.
Last-ditch efforts before the people decide just who will control Congress. Plus, a decade after the destruction, we sit down with the bishop who led Brooklyn and Queens through Superstorm Sandy.
You see disasters on TV, but now this is in your backyard.
I'm Christine Persichetti. Currents News starts right now.
Holy Mary,
Mother of God,
pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death.
Prayers said by every Catholic at least once, but are you reciting the Rosary right? There's multiple decades and multiple mysteries, but sometimes praying the Rosary can be a mystery in itself. Despite it being one of the best known of all Catholic devotions, it can take hours and lots of practice, and you can still not quite get it right. Currents News' Jessica Easthope tells us students at a Catholic high school in Queens are realizing that practice makes perfect.
Take a rosary, take a seat. Take a rosary, take a seat.
For many students at St. Francis Prep, this is the first time they've ever held a rosary. If you're new to it, it can be intimidating. Once you make the sign of the cross, you're on your way to saying 67 prayers in total. 53 of them are Hail Marys. It might sound basic, but a lot of people do it wrong.
You'd be surprised. There's a lot of sort of particular things that different cultures do, different prayers that people throw in, or some prayers that people leave out.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and
Father
blessed
Ralph
is the fruit
Adel
of
is the
thy
chaplain
womb,
at St.
Jesus.
Francis Prep, and every Thursday during October, the month of Our Lady of the Rosary, he teaches classes about the prayers.
In terms of what goes wrong, sometimes you'll have people who just sometimes think because they've prayed the Hail Mary a million times in their life, they have it down pat. So just teaching them really to have that concentration in the midst of prayer to be able to follow along.
The level of familiarity with the Rosary varies from student to student. Junior Gabriel Harris is just learning.
I was kind of just sort of confused on what the Rosary is, and then obviously I talked to Father Ralph about it, and Father Ralph explained to me exactly what it is, and honestly it makes me feel a lot more comfortable to pray on my own.
The second joyful mystery.
There are 4 mysteries of the Rosary. Each mystery contains 5 moments in the life of Christ and our Blessed Mother, represented by the beads in between each decade.
Oh, sorry. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Senior Emma Bogdan, who's been saying the Rosary since she was little, proves you can still slip up.
You just have to keep trying at it. And as like a young woman who's a practicing Catholic, it really helps me feel closer to Mary.
Father Ralph says once the students get past memorization, all that's left is Mary.
So we're not concentrating necessarily on the words, but hopefully getting to the point where we feel comfortable enough with our Blessed Mother to say, I want to give this Hail Mary to a different intention.
The goal is to show students the beauty of the Rosary is not what happens while you're praying it, but how you live after. In Fresh Meadows, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
No one said it was easy, but it is worth it. Now that you had a brief introduction, you can continue to practice your own rosary every day on Net TV. And you can recite it with the Bishop of Brooklyn, Robert Brennan, every day right here on Net at 7 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and once more at 9:30 at night. The Bishop prays with high school students from all over the Diocese of Brooklyn. There's only a couple weeks left in the month of the Rosary, but plenty of opportunities to pray. New York City's major tent city on Randalls Island is off to a slow start. More than 20,000 asylum seekers have arrived in recent months, but only a few people are staying at the controversial facility. And by a few, reports say only 3 men have checked in so far. It's set up to accommodate 500 single men arriving without families. The camp was initially supposed to be a temporary facility, but that was wheeled back too. The mayor saying there will be no limit on how long migrants can stay there. The site is supposed to alleviate pressure on the city's homeless shelter system. In recent months, because of the migrant influx, that population has hit an all-time high. testing New York's right to shelter law. But homeless residents at a shelter just yards away from the tent city are giving that law a failing grade. They say the migrants are getting better treatment than they ever did. We saw officials bring reporters on a tour through the tent city on Tuesday, showcasing laundry rooms, a dining hall, and recreation spaces with flat screen TVs and an Xbox. Meantime, at the homeless shelter, the elevators seldom work. And just last year, a person was trapped in one for 4 nights before firefighters got him out. The mayor addressed their concerns.
This is not about comparing those who need assistance and care from the city. We're not doing that. And we're not going to, you speak to some that will look at who's there in the shelter on Randalls Island and say, well, why am I not on Randalls Island surrounded by water? There's always going to be reasons that people are going to feel as though someone else is getting something better than them. My job is to make sure everyone gets a place to sleep that's safe, 3 meals a day, and the support that they need so they can cycle out of being in the shelter. And that's what we're doing.
Mayor Adams said he has visited the shelter and they are sending workers to fix it. Over in Washington, the president is hoping that border crossings and all these buses will begin to slow. Despite announcing in April that it would end Trump's expulsion policy, the White House is now embracing it, and Title 42 seems to be working. Stefano Pozzebon has the story from Bogota, where migrants are rethinking the trek.
Thousands of migrants, most of them Venezuelans, are finding themselves stranded in Mexico, in part because of a recent decision from the White House to expand Title 42 to Venezuelans. The measure allows U.S. border patrols to deport back into Mexico undocumented migrants that are found on U.S. soil on public health ground. But these migrants who are traveling from South America through Mexico trying to reach the U.S. southern border are saying that their lives are now in a limbo as their plans to relocate to the United States have been broken by this new policy. Some of them are thinking of remaining in Mexico, where already 77,000 Venezuelans live and work every day, according to the Mexican Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard. In the Mexican cities along the U.S. southern border, such as Tijuana, Ciudad Juarez, and Matamoros, as well as cities in the southern state of Chiapas, have seen the largest movements of migrants in recent days.
That was Stefano Pozzebon reporting. The U.S. bishops were huge supporters of ending Title 42. In the wake of that reversal, the conference chair of the Committee on Migration released a statement saying this: "We simply cannot allow partisan division to continue to impede the needed interventions of government. And while there are no easy solutions to the challenges we face, there is a just path forward that is waiting to be paved by those who are committed to the future of our country."
Also tonight, the big question: who will control Congress?
It's not politically motivated at all.
Midterm mayhem in full effect, everything from the economy to abortion dividing this nation.
I'm 100% pro-life.
Right now on Currents News, the countdown to November.
President Biden is out there for the final stretch. Today, he's campaigning in Pittsburgh, touting a bill that outlines Democrats' plans to rebuild this country's crumbling infrastructure. Currents News' Andy Madison has more on the midterm countdown.
The economy and inflation are looming large over the midterm elections. Only 20 days before Americans choose which party will control Congress and state capitals. At the center of the campaign, gas prices on the uptick and the White House on edge as President Biden and Democrats fight to maintain their majorities in the House and Senate.
We're going to continue to stabilize markets and decrease the prices at a time when the actions of other countries have caused such volatility.
The president once again tapping into the nation's emergency oil stockpile, hoping to rein in gas prices and ease the economic headwinds facing the party. He dismissed Republican criticism the actions were linked to the November elections.
It's not politically motivated at all. It's making sure there's enough oil that's being pumped by the companies so that we have the ability to be able to produce enough gas that we need here at home.
Early voting is already underway, with nearly 4 million Americans already casting their ballots. From coast to coast, the campaigns are taking final shape. In Florida, a volley of heated exchanges over abortion rights Tuesday night between Republican Senator Marco Rubio and Democratic Congresswoman Val Demings.
I'm 100% pro-life, not because I want to deny anyone their rights, but because I believe that innocent human life is worthy of the protection of our laws.
You have been clear that you support no exceptions, even including rape and incest. Now, as a police detective who investigated cases of rape and incest, no, Senator, I don't think it's okay for a 10-year-old girl to be raped and have to carry the seed of her rapist.
Across the country, Democrats are hoping supporters will be motivated by a fight for abortion rights, even as Republicans believe crime, immigration, and the economy will resonate with voters. Andy Madison, Currents News.
Some experts believe that this midterm could have one of the highest voter turnouts in history, and the U.S. bishops, as usual, want you to be part of it. They want you to vote with your conscience, so they created a teaching document. To read it, just go to usccb.org and search for Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship. That's the name of the document. Inside, there are pages of resources, goals for Catholics, and major issues outlined. Those who help uphold the law prayed for guidance on Wednesday as the Diocese of Brooklyn held one of its annual Red Masses at the Immaculate Conception Center in Queens. The liturgy celebrates the opening of the court year. It's been a tradition throughout Europe for centuries, but in the Diocese of Brooklyn, the Catholic Lawyers Guild dates back to the 1930s. It's a chance for attorneys to come together to pray that the Holy Spirit provides them with the strength to never give up in the pursuit of justice. This liturgy was celebrated by retired Brooklyn Auxiliary Bishop Octavio Cisneros. But there's another one. The lawyers and judges will soon meet again in Brooklyn to hold Mass with Bishop Brennan. That will be on Wednesday, October 26th at 5:30 p.m. at the Cathedral Basilica of St. James. Net TV will be broadcasting that Mass live, so you can watch it right here. For the second time this month, New York City is proposing you snitch on your neighbors. The Department of Sanitation announced the removal of this outdoor dining shed in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn today and encouraged New Yorkers to take part in the removal of any abandoned sheds by calling 311. This snitch sitch comes just a week after the city council proposed a bill that would reward New Yorkers for calling in illegal parking complaints. There's a lot more news headed your way. Nearly a decade ago, Superstorm Sandy washed away homes and flooded streets and churches.
The most difficult thing was probably finding our priest.
Bishop Emeritus Nicholas DiMarzio reflects on how the diocese responded to this natural disaster. Plus, retirees who lost their homes in Florida trying to figure out how to remake their lives. And some Neanderthal news. We're getting details of the family and social life of some of our ancient cousins. This was the scene in Queens nearly 10 years ago after Superstorm Sandy wiped out the Rockaway Boardwalk and homes all along the coast. It was one of the worst natural disasters ever to hit the Diocese of Brooklyn. And right after the winds died down, people across the city and country rallied to help the victims. That included Catholic Charities Brooklyn and Queens, which jumped into action even before the storm hit. Days worth of meals were delivered to the homebound and 24-hour residences. After the storm, the charity set up recovery sites where food, water, clothes, and cleaning supplies were handed out. And Catholic Charities has also been there for the long term. Under the leadership of Bishop Emeritus Nicholas DiMarzio, a $2 million Hurricane Sandy Relief and Recovery Fund was created. Bishop DiMarzio joins us now to talk more about the response after the storm. Bishop, it's nice to have you here.
Good to be here.
So, Bishop, you saw that devastation firsthand.
Yes.
Tell us about it. What was going through your mind when you were touring that?
Well, it's a little bit hard to comprehend. I mean, you see disasters on TV, but now this is in your backyard. So it was a big difference to see our churches that had visited all of them. By that time, was there 8 years already. And some of them were really hard hit. The most difficult thing was probably finding our priest, because they had to evacuate most of them. And we didn't know where they went. and we didn't have everybody's personal cell numbers. So we were searching for people for the first few days. It was a difficult time to live through, but we learned a lot of lessons, I think, too.
Yeah, I was going to say that. And, you know, Breezy Point in particular took a beating from the storm. You know, we were just talking about it. The wind causing the fire to go from one home to the next, flooding, so the firefighters couldn't get there to put out the fires. But there was a statue of the Blessed Mother that was in front of a home that was burned down. Here's the picture here. It's an iconic picture.
Right.
All of that devastation behind it, and the statue survived. What went through your mind when you saw that?
Well, I did see it in place because I was there the day after. And I can say, well, Our Lady was maybe protecting this area. At least there wasn't a great loss of life, thank God. You know, a few people, but not what it could have been worse.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I want to take a look at the response from the diocese in the weeks after the storm. Under your leadership, CCBQ had over 1,200 volunteers working 35,000 hours to help thousands in need. For the long term, you created a $2 million Hurricane Sandy Relief and Recovery Fund. How did you know where to even begin with the relief efforts?
It affected everybody, the poor and the rich. The area is very diverse. That whole coast area, there's, I guess, about 12 to 14 parishes. Actually, 16 are all along the coast there. So we're very vulnerable. So we set up the relief centers where people could get food, they could get clothing, other things that they needed. We had social workers working with them. Some people really were disoriented. They needed a lot more help. So it was a variety of things that happened. So we really mobilized between Catholic Charities, St. Vincent de Paul Society. Everybody really pitched in to do what was needed. There was emergency aid that was really very necessary.
And still now, 10 years later, some people are still going through that recovery process. How has the diocese continued the relief efforts to this day?
Well, you know, some people, again, have not been able to rebuild, especially in Breezy where the houses were destroyed. The parishes are really the first line of defense. The parish church is where people, the rubber hits the road, where they really know the people, where they can get the kind of help they do. And Breezy is a place where there's continually issues that come up that the parish helps with, and other parishes in the same way.
Now we're still seeing one devastating storm after the other. What is some advice you can give to a diocese that may be going through this right now?
Well, learn the lessons you learn by the disaster. So we did have a disaster plan in place. Not everybody knew about it. Now we need to get people aware of it. That was the whole thing. We did another disaster plan afterwards, but I still think we still have to get people aware that there is something to rely upon. There's advice, there's emergency actions that you should take. The other thing that we learned is that we really can't have anything in these flood areas on the ground level. They have to be raised up. The heating systems, the air conditioning, the hot water heaters, everything has to go above ground. So hopefully that you're not going to get inundated. So all of that is lessons learned and should be kept.
And hopefully we don't have a massive storm like that ever again.
It's in 100 years, but
yeah, another
knows?
100, yeah. Bishop Emeritus Nicholas DiMarzio, thanks so much for being here.
Good to be here with you. Take care.
Bishop DiMarzio will speak more on Superstorm Sandy in next week's tablet. Our reporters are working hard right now to provide a full look back on the decades since the devastation, what was accomplished and what still needs to be done. You can keep up with all of that extensive coverage on the days leading up to the anniversary on thetablet.org. Meanwhile, weeks after Hurricane Ian, residents and business owners are finally making that long drive home onto Sanibel Island in Florida. They cheered as they entered Sanibel for the first time on wheels since the storm hit. Crews worked a total of 36,000 hours over 15 days to patch up 5 different spots of the causeway that was washed away by the hurricane, many taking it as a positive sign that the devastated island will rebuild. But not everyone is able to do that. It's a struggle for seniors, people who retired to Florida to live out their golden years, now facing a wrenching situation. Some can't afford to rebuild, and those who can may not have the time or energy to do so.
More than 3 weeks after Hurricane Ian made landfall in Florida, a trail of destruction remains. Senior citizens were hit especially hard.
Florida is where people come to retire. There's a large elderly population that really are facing their darkest hours.
I'm sorry I didn't tidy up for you.
Lisa Needham's home in Arcadia is gutted down to the studs.
The water level was up to here.
The items that made this house a home are piled by the curb.
I can't replace that. The house is a house, but those things, I still have the memory though, so it's okay.
Come on, Bella.
The 62-year-old and her boyfriend are living in their friend's RV, expecting the rebuild could cost as much as $80,000 and take months at least, with no thoughts of relocating.
This is what I wanted. This is what I always wanted, so I'm gonna stick with it.
They have flood insurance, but don't know how much they'll get back. Lisa retired last year. Now she says she may have to go back to work.
To put out that kind of money would be very tough on me right now.
The storm displaced thousands of Floridians. Few had flood insurance, and rebuilding isn't an option for everyone.
I'm going to be stuck here for a while, if not forever.
77-year-old Toby Freeman is in Buffalo, New York, where his daughter Krista lives. This after he says 7 feet of water wrecked his home. His wife Karen is still recovering in a rehab center in Florida.
The only thing I got out of that house was the clothing on my back, and I had to throw it away.
He says they have little savings and no insurance, so they're moving to Buffalo. Krista is dipping into her retirement funds to help them find a home.
Have to take care of my family. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Maybe we can keep the sheets.
Alice and Richard Johnson aren't leaving Florida, but they are moving into their RV full time. They say they didn't have flood insurance, and a lot of their retirement funds are tied up in this house. Alice turns 85 next week and just wants to focus on enjoying life.
How many good years do I have left to live? I don't want to spend the next 2 years rebuilding a house, dealing with contractors, doing work ourselves, even picking out furniture for what? For who? For me? I think that we would rather sell it and live for the next couple years.
Many senior Florida residents live on fixed incomes and purchased their homes before the housing boom when the state was far more affordable. You can still help the people of Florida thanks to a special fund set up by the Diocese of Brooklyn. Just make a check payable to the Compostela Fund of the Archdiocese of Brooklyn and mail it to Diocesan Finance Office, 310 Prospect Park West, Brooklyn, New York, 11215. Money donated will also go to recovery efforts in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. Still to come on Currents News, well, they didn't use Ancestry.com, but researchers did study the DNA of a family who lived on this earth some 54,000 years ago. What they discovered coming up next. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Scientists have discovered the oldest family portrait. Through testing ancient strands of DNA, we now know about one of God's first families. They were part of a tight-knit hunting community of about 20 people who lived in the foothills of the Siberian mountains around 54,000 years ago. This is the first time scientists were able to directly document the intimate details of the Neanderthal family. Wow, that is amazing. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.